Good afternoon and welcome to today's presentation of In-Depth with the new AASL School Library Standards. Today we are going to look at the Shared Foundation Explore. If this is your first time joining us, we are glad to have you. This is the 5th webinar in the series, starting with the standards overview. All of the recordings are available on the AASL Standards playlist on the Wyoming State Library's YouTube channel. Jennison will be doing one more webinar after this to finish out the series. So for now, without further ado, I will turn this over to Jennison Lucas, a Wyoming school librarian, Wyoming AASL affiliate, and chair of the AASL Standards Implementation Committee. And she will tell you all about Explore, the 5th of 6 shared foundations.
Thank you, Paige. So I'll start with our slide here to see our contact information. You can contact me at my email address or Twitter handle. Same thing with Paige. If you ask Paige a question she doesn't know, she's going to refer it to me. So if you want to save a step, you can go that way. Our outline of, before we start with the outline of learning targets, I want to make sure that I am clear that the contents of this webinar are not an official AASL publication webinar. This is basically my work and I'm doing it mostly for my fellow Wyoming librarians as a way to help share the information that I've learned through reading the book, through a pre-conference that I attended at AASL in Phoenix. And so I'm glad that there are people I know who have watched some of the other ones from other states, and I'm glad to share. I just want to make sure that everyone knows this is not an official AASL, even if I am on the chair of the standards committee at this point. So a brief outline of our learning targets. We're going to do a quick introductory overview about how to find the standards in case this is your first foray into meeting with the standards. If you're watching the recording, you can of course just skip past this until you don't recognize the slides. We're going to talk a little bit about the terminology of the standards. Then we're going to start looking specifically at the standards for Explore. And I have to say I'm excited about this, and if you've watched the other webinars, I say that about everyone because the more I look at them, the more I really like these standards. And then we're going to look across the frameworks to see how the librarian competencies and library alignments sort of line up along the way. So first, accessing the standards, you can do this through the purchasing the book. The book contains a lot of excellent information. It's a very nice one-stop kind of resource. There are a lot of appendices at the end that talk about several of AASL's position statements and information just about the library field. There's articles in here about different personas and different ways that we might use them. The standards themselves have a little bit more in-depth look. It does have a hefty price tag for some people. It is $99 if you're an AASL member. I think it's $199 if you're not, something like that. I think it's worth every penny. This is going to be a book that I go back to over and over again. My teachers are starting to see it showing up on my desk quite frequently. There is also an app, which is $19.99, and it includes all of the frameworks of the standards. So it includes the learner standards, it includes the librarian standards and the school library alignments, just like the book. There's a lot less of the extra material in the app, but you can actually access the standards themselves for a very reasonable price, and the app is really easy to flip back and forth through so that you can see how things line up and how you might be able to access those standards. And then at the standards portal at standards.aasl.org, the learner framework is there for a free download. There is a lot of amazing information that has gotten put up on there to help. There are some single-page sheets to hand out to administrators, to parents, to teachers to help tell about what these standards are and how they affect our students and what we might use for all of these different things. So that is a lot of stuff available online there for free. So it's definitely worth taking the trip over there to check it out. There is also on that standards portal a a calendar of standards-related events that are happening around the country. So if it's they have a specific color if it's an official AASL event. There's a different color if it's a local affiliate event. This would be considered an affiliate event for the Wyoming affiliate. So you can look for your state and see what is going on in your state affiliate. A lot of the Twitter chats and webinars and things like that are going to be available via the web for anybody to access. So that's always an important and incredible thing to be doing and checking out. So some basic terminology about our standards. First of all, we have learners, and learners are anybody. I like that they're using the word learners instead of students, because that way it refers to me as a librarian. I'm a lifelong learner. I am still learning these standards. It's part of that. My principals are the lead learners in our building, for example. Our teachers are going to be learners. All of that is what we want to model as teachers, is being students, being learners. We're not talking about the common beliefs in this webinar. We did in the overview webinar that I did at the beginning before we started this series. But the common beliefs are really an outline of those things that librarians hold near and dear to our hearts, and all of our standards fall back into expounding on those common beliefs. The shared foundations are the kind of the top tier of our new standards guideline. There are 6 shared foundations that really kind of go to the core of what it is that we want students and what we want our learners to get out of our libraries. And so they include to inquire, include, collaborate, curate, explore, and engage. Underneath each shared foundation is a key commitment that kind of expounds on what that means. So what does it mean to explore is what we'll look at as the key commitment this time. Domains are going to be underneath the key commitments. Those domains are to think, create, share, and grow. So these are how we're going to access those standards. So under each shared foundation, there are standards for thinking, creating, sharing, and growing. The competencies are going to be like the actual standards themselves, what it is that we want our students to know and be able to do, what we want our learners to do, what we want us to be able to do under the librarian standards are competencies. And that we'll talk a little bit about that in another slide as well. And then the alignments are how we align our library to these competencies. And so instead of it being a completely separate, and then this is what you should have in your library, we have alignments into our competencies for our school libraries as well. So here's the overview of all 6 shared foundations with their key commitments. And we've been doing this webinar in the order, these webinars in the series in the order that they are in this document. So we are now up to the 5th one, to explore. And you can see its key commitment is to discover and innovate in a growth mindset developed through experience and reflection. Underneath that, we have our domains, and then the big circle image on here kind of shows how those domains fit inside of our shared foundations, so that we have those shared foundations and key commitments, but that think, create, share, grow is embedded within all of those as we're looking. So let's delve a little bit into explore. And we're going to discover and innovate in a growth mindset developed through experience and reflection. And this has been so exciting for me to look at, because this goes to the core of one of my core beliefs about libraries and school libraries, and how they're so important for providing a growth mindset. That libraries are not about learning content and memorizing information. Libraries are the place in our school where we get to grow past that, where we can take something and learn something that we don't get to do in our classroom, where we can figure out how to make it grow a little bit harder, a little bit more in depth, a little bit broader, however we want to approach that. And then I love that they've included this as experience and reflection, because I'm finding that I'm trying to teach my elementary school students reflection and how to do that in the best way. So this is what the Explore Foundation looks like, the Explore Shared Foundation. So over at the side, I've put on the V for, this is Roman numeral 5, for explore. That's the number of shared foundation. If I'm going to refer to one of these competencies in my writing, or to refer to it maybe to other librarians, I would say the V for explore, the A for think, then the 1 would then refer to this first shared domain, or this first competency under the shared domain. And so that would be the quick way of writing them out. So under this domain, we're going to take a look at each of those domains on a separate slide and talk about deconstructing them and what exactly it means, because sometimes our standards and the overall, this is what we should be able to do, kind of incorporate several other things. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to get to that. So first of all, we have the outcome versus competency. And in this, this is a little bit of a change in our shared foundations. So outcome standards are the ones in which you would be able to measure and everybody's going to come to the same conclusion and we're going to be able to show, yes, we mastered that. Competency standards are ones that grow a little bit with us, that we're going to be able to show some sort of competency at any level. It's not as easily benchmarked to say at kindergarten you're going to do this, at first grade you're going to do this, because there are things that you're going to be able to do to master it at a kindergarten level that is going to be different from mastering it at a middle school level, different than mastering it at a high school level. And that competency standards, the way I think of them, grow with us. So I think of it a little bit like this. You have a puzzle to put together, a jigsaw puzzle. All of those pieces go together. You can put them together in a large number of ways, but they're always going to come out as the picture at the end. And so you can teach several processes or several ways of putting this puzzle together, that you could start with the corners and you can start with the end pieces and you can start with putting a piece of the picture together and then adding them in, and there's lots of different ways to put it together, but when you're done, you have a picture. Versus, so that's an outcome, versus a competency where you can teach someone how to build with Legos and give them the same set of Legos and every day they'll build something different with them because they know how the pieces work and they understand the concept of what to do with those competency standards, and then they can put them together in any number of ways to build any number of things. And what you build in kindergarten is going to be different than what you build as a senior, as you're looking at that. Personally, when I use Legos, I tend to always build walls. You know, when my son builds with Legos, he builds dinosaurs. They sometimes look a lot like my walls, but to him, they're dinosaurs. But it's just, we can take the same pieces and put them together in so many different ways. And that's one of the things I like about these standards. They feel accessible at so many different levels for so many different ways. Okay, so now let's dig into explore. And we're going to start with the think domain. And our competencies here are that learners develop and satisfy personal curiosity. I love the fact that we're talking about personal curiosity in here by 1, reading widely and deeply in multiple formats and write and create for a variety of purposes. This is the spot in these standards where we get the reading part. And we read, I mean, you have to read through all of it, but I know that there have been some conversations where I've seen people asking about, but where is the reading for fun part? And this is where it is. And I love this because I know a lot of my students read nonfiction for fun, and they love that idea of let me take nonfiction and let me see what else I can learn, and that's fun for them. And yet for so many years it feels like I've worked with a lot of teachers that have pushed, but that's nonfiction and somehow you should be reading chapter books, and that has its place because your chapter books help you to learn, you know, stamina and reading for longer periods of time and things like that. But then it sometimes makes it feel like the nonfiction is not as good of reading, and in fact it's essential to read nonfiction. So I love that even with everything, all of the standards, we have this focus on learning and research and inquiry and things that lead us to nonfiction. And now we have Explore, where it's reading widely and deeply in multiple formats. I add in genres as I think about that. We have to teach our kids how to read a website. We have to teach our kids all of that. So I'm just going to move over and do the deconstruction for this one. So first of all, we have to understand that reading material comes in many formats. Books, magazines, news articles, print articles, online articles. Reading a newspaper is a different skill than reading the news on a website. All of that is different. I probably should have put one of my deconstructions in here to know how to read in those different formats. With my third graders, I actually teach a 10-week unit on how to use the internet. And it takes us about 2 lessons to go through how to read a website, how to know where to find the title, the author, the article, the date that it was written, the date it was updated, what you do with a hyperlink. What is a hyperlink? They've never been taught that. And it's always kind of fascinating because we have a discussion with the third graders about how they are taught to read a book. And we're taught specifically, this is the cover, this is the spine, you open it up this way, this is how you turn pages, but we don't do the same thing online. And so we slow that way down, and it's frustrating for the third graders at first until they realize that, oh wait, I do want to know where to find that information and how to use a navigation bar and what those terms are, because I use them in everything else that we do. So I've also thrown in here that we need to know various genres and reading sources. We need to know the difference between finding a news article on the open internet, finding things in a database, how to do each of those things, what those different genres might do, how they might work with us, what literary nonfiction is versus factual nonfiction, which is a little hard at elementary level, to kind of parse through what really truly happened and what somebody's added to make it a better story. I put in here too, recognizing fiction versus nonfiction. The same thing. I actually just had a conversation with a teacher today about reading historical fiction for research. And she's like, well, you know, it takes so long to read the historical fiction and find out what really happened. And then we had to have the discussion about the fact that that's actually fiction. And it's hard to find what really truly happened in a historical fiction because they've added to the story, they've added things, so you might need to look at author's notes and things like that. But it's an interesting conversation to have. So then our second one, I'll back that up for a moment. The second competency is reflecting. So learners develop and satisfy personal curiosity by reflecting and questioning assumptions and possible misconceptions. And this one is fun to think about, but I realized a little hard to deconstruct. So I put in here, we have to recognize that different points of view are used in stories and in nonfiction, and recognize what that point of view is. Is this the point of view of a scientist? Is this the point of view of a parent? Is this the point of view of a kid? Is this the point of view of somebody who has just come across this article? And as we start to use more online resources like blogs and things like that, where information is presented as fact, we have to come back and look and say, wait a minute, what is their purpose of this article? What are they trying to tell us? What perspective are they writing this from? And be able to look into all of those different pieces and parts. One of the things I love about this is in elementary school, there's a lot of interesting assumptions that we do about we assume that we know things because we heard them once upon a time, or somebody has told us something once upon a time, and we don't understand what a misconception is, that maybe somebody just misunderstood when they heard that fact, and trying to back that out and say, wait a minute, is that really true? Is that really what happened? Is an important part. So then we also are deconstructing into questioning the truth of statements and information. If I say that school is closing at this certain time, is that true, or am I hoping? Or am I trying to play a trick on you? How is that all going to work in? Or something about field trips, all of those things that we have to say, wait a second, I think you misunderstood. School's not getting out early today. we're stopping this class early so that you can do something else. So making sure that all of that is part of that. And also verifying our information in multiple sources. A lot of elementary school students want to read one sentence and think that that's the answer. And they don't understand that they might need to go and verify it and find it's the same answer in another source. Or that maybe there's more than one answer and we need to keep looking and see what other people's perspectives are on that. Okay, so then 3, engaging in inquiry-based processes for personal growth. Again, we're into this idea of taking ownership of our learning and doing processes, personal processes. So one of these is to recognize knowledge gaps and know that there's always something more to learn about a topic. And then choose areas of personal interest, especially if you're now at my level where I teach, we do a lot of, we'll teach an overview thing and then ask the kids to come up with something else that they're interested in that ties into it. So there's a little bit of having to think outside of that and say, what personal learning can I add to this? What are some things that I would like to know about that tie into this topic, but that we're not really talking about yet, and try to branch that out. It's always exciting when I have kids come into the library and say, our teacher is just telling us about this, and I want to know more. What books do you have on that topic, or where can I look? And being able to have those conversations is empowering. It's a great point of need learning, and teaching the kids that this is how more knowledge is created, because we say, wait, I want to know more. Okay, so Explore Think is going to look different at different levels. So at kindergarten, I'm thinking it's exposure to a variety of reading materials. Let's read it as an ebook. Let's see it as a movie. Let's read it as a story. And we want kindergarten to read in a variety of genres, a variety of access points to our students. Comparing the background knowledge to what is read. So having that time to stop and say, well, what do you already know about this before you read a story? And then see if it changes what you think you knew. I saw a great, and I can't remember who it was that did this presentation, and it was several years ago. We had somebody come to one of our schools and talking about how to use a KWL chart. Sorry, I call them KWRL charts, because when I use them, I put in a column for R for resources and ask students to list out where they think they're going to find the answers that they want to look for as a processing point. But they talked about listing what you know, and then in the what you want to know column to actually look at the column for what you know, and then what else do I want to know about that thing I know. So I know whales live in the ocean. I want to know what oceans. Or I know this and I want to know this now in addition to it. These are the other questions that I have that relate to that. And then you go and find that. And it's a way to take our research deeper. And I thought that was fabulous, because that's a great way to increase our background knowledge and add to it and go deeper and teach the kids to that it's not just I know this fact, what other fact do I want to know? Because how do we know what we don't know? Like how do you form that question is really hard, especially in lower grades. So by 5th grade, we're going to grow a little bit, and we should definitely have exposure to a variety of genres and formats for reading material. Allow them to try to branch into magazine articles, newspaper articles. How are those the same? How are those different? Why do we want those instead of a book sometimes? All of those different types of reference materials should be coming into play. Reading in a variety of formats and genres is going to show up again, that we want them to be able to access ebooks, access online news articles, access magazine articles in print, the newspaper. Several years ago, I actually had some 4th graders who came to the library every day to read the newspaper, and it blew me away because I had to start reading it so that we could talk about it. And I am a headline reader until I find something that is actually interesting. That kid stretched me a little bit. Also then in 5th grade, questioning what is known in the light of new information. So, okay, now I just read this, but I thought this, so which one of us is right? Do I remember where I learned that knowledge that I just feel like I know? And kind of move that way. And then choosing personal inquiry questions. This was hard. I just did this with some fifth graders, and I did it very open-ended. I gave them a sheet of paper and I said, talk at your table and brainstorm any questions that you can think of, anything that you want to know. And some kids were really good at it and came up with some really interesting, thoughtful questions. Some kids were like very surface-oriented questions, and like they were asking things like, why is so-and-so wearing short sleeves today? Whereas other kids were asking things like, why do we have belly buttons? And how did the universe start? And why are we afraid of Friday the 13th? And things that were, oh, those are interesting questions that we might want to investigate. 8th grade, we're going to go a little bit deeper, seek out a variety of formats for reading material, especially in research, that we want to be able to be starting to access things at different points. Follow that inquiry process to explore all parts of a topic, not just say, okay, I know one fact, that's good enough. We want to know as much as we can know. By 10th grade, we should be regularly using multiple formats of information materials, following an inquiry process to speak and share with credibility, adapting personal inquiry interests to curricular topics. This is, at this point, we should be taking our learning a lot more into our own hands and be able to say, wait a second, this is actually something I'm very interested in, because by 10th grade, we're starting to think about what kind of things we want to do when we grow up. We're going to be, you know, now that we are grown up maybe in 10th grade, what do we want to do with these things? And then figuring out where what I'm learning and what teachers are exposing me to fits with what I believe and what I love and what I am passionate about. And I really like horses, and now I've kindly gotten to take this course in animal husbandry from something, and wow, this is amazing. Let me see what else I can learn, and to tie that into this other love. Okay, so moving to, this is our second domain, to create. Our competencies here, our learners are going to construct new knowledge by problem solving through cycles of design, implementation, and reflection, and persisting through self-directed pursuits by tinkering and making. And I will admit that this one was hard for me to think about because I love the idea of it. In practice, a lot of the stuff that I was thinking about with creating and this explore thing, I find difficult, partly because I work at 4 different schools, and so how do I set up the ability for them to do that? If I don't have the same resources at each school, I would have to get it and carry it around with me. So how do I make that work? And what if we don't finish in a class period and we need to keep it there so that we can continue? And that sort of thing makes it difficult. Deconstructing these standards, though, for the problem solving, part of that is recognizing problems that need to be solved. This is a huge thing for our kids to learn, because that is what people want to hire. When we're talking career ready, people who employ others want to find people who can recognize the problem that needs to be solved and then solve it. And so that's the beginning step. Know our inquiry process and be able to apply them to the appropriate discipline. And I put on here that we need to have inquiry processes, because the more that I've looked at different approaches to teaching inquiry, I really think some of them go, some of the official processes work better in certain situations than others. So if you're doing an open-ended, just I want you to do some, I just want you to find some stuff out, doing the big 6 is a little bit more academic than what the task requires, as an example. So, and then knowing maybe there is an appropriate inquiry process for a specific discipline, and I don't necessarily know what those would be, but because I'm not as familiar with other disciplines, and I work in elementary school where we kind of do a general overview of things. But I'm sure that scientific processes, my sister would, I'm sure, tell me that there's specific things for how you go about learning about different science topics. Understanding that inquiry is not usually complete in one search, one walkthrough of the process. Again, in elementary school, I see this all the time, that we want to just read a book and know the answers. We're just going to walk through it, and once we go through it one time, then we're done. And that's not what inquiry does. I mean, it's messy, and it's supposed to be messy, and it's amazing if you accept the messiness of it, but you really have to go through it multiple times and look at it from multiple angles. And then in our persisting through self-directed pursuits, that idea of considering multiple answers or options for problem solving, trying it out, think about what it is that is happening, how many different ways can we try, seeking out divergent perspectives, constructing new knowledge through experimentation or creation. And this was the one that was really hard for me to deconstruct, because when I read this standard, I really think about, you know, how awesome it would be to do some of these activities that I see people post about on social media, that we read the Three Little Pigs, and then the kids build little houses, and the big bad wolf in the form of a hairdryer comes through and tries to blow them down. So who built the sturdiest house? Out of what materials? I love those ideas. And then trying to figure out how do you put that into practice, knowing that it takes longer than 30 minutes to do a process like that, and being able to kind of go through that. I have seen the things about Rubik's cubes, and there's a place that, and I can't remember the place to be able to quote it exactly, but there is some place that you can borrow Rubik's cubes to help create mosaics. There are, so like just the Lego walls that people are putting up and just letting kids play and tinker. And I just encountered on Facebook yesterday a video of somebody who has constructed a cello out of Legos, and somehow or another with some robotics components made it play. It wasn't very great music, but it was a really amazing thing to watch it work. So, but what a great way to just play and learn, because that's how kids learn best, according to some research. So at our different levels, create, explore looks like in kindergarten, using our senses to explore, using those rice boxes to have them pull out the different letters to explore the letters of the alphabet, pulling out, let's see if you can find two things that are orange, and but it's hands-on and digging in. I also then added on hands-on manipulatives of whatever kind. Puppets do this. I mean, anything that you can explore. Craft activities that go with the story times, like the I don't know, the building houses for the little pigs might be a little bit high for some of the kindergartners I know, but I'm sure they would have fun trying. And then even as simple as making predictions and then seeing what happens. And that could look like a class experiment of, hey, what do you think would happen if, with whatever materials? I have some popsicle sticks and some feathers. Which one is going to fall fastest, and why do you think that? And let's try it out. And what if we add a block, or what if we added something else? And just let them play through that and ask those questions. And it's okay to be wrong. This is the spot where it's okay to fail, and just to see what you learn from it. In 5th grade, considering our audience, and I throw that in here because I really started to think about how you would tell your parents about it might be different from how you would tell your peers about it. And making those different presentations is part of this creation. And I want it to be very engaging. How I as a 5th grader might present to a 4th grader will be very different from how I as a 5th grader will present to kindergarten. And giving that authentic audience would be a great way to kind of take the same content and adjust and play with how you approach it. Again, with hands-on manipulatives, this is great for math, for science, for social studies projects. Experimentation with process and objects. And I put this in with the idea of process of, well, I could try it this way, but what if I reorganized what I was doing and did it this way? We just created websites with my 5th graders, and there were some of them who wanted to do it exactly right, like what do I do next? And they were a little frustrated by the fact that I said, figure out what works for your topic. you have to decide how many pages your website has because it depends on your topic. And for some of them, that was a little hard to have to think about that because traditionally they're told exactly what to do and what resources and exactly how to make it. And websites are a little different from a poster, which is what they're used to. Learning inquiry and research processes, knowing that there are different ways to look at things, different processes you might go through. By 8th grade, we're going to go a little bit more, use inquiry research processes for self-directed learning, take it from following the steps the teacher gives you to, oh, I know some steps, let me do it this way. Again, hands-on experimentation, considering your audience as you're presenting, creating a new understanding through careful exploration. That idea of, let me see if I can make this work a different way. Let's start to work on it a little different of a direction. By 10th grade, they should be able to use discipline-specific inquiry research processes for self-directed learning. What happens in earth science, what happens in chemistry, what happens in social studies research, what happens in English research. I know I was in college when I finally figured out how to do literature criticism. Like, I had no idea how to write that kind of paper, and I wish somebody had taught me that that was different from a factual social studies kind of paper. So I think that that would be good to be kind of talking about at this point. Hands-on experimentation and exploration. If you give a 10th grader a box of Legos, they're going to have as much fun as the kindergartner. Considering real-world problems and implications of their research. We should be, by 10th grade, starting to actually try to involve community and solving community problems. We could probably be doing that even in elementary school, but definitely by 10th grade, that's something that we want to have be part of their portfolio. Okay, so moving to explore share. Our learners engage with the learning community by expressing curiosity about a topic of personal interest or curricular relevance, of co-constructing innovative means of investigation, of collaboratively identifying innovative solutions to a challenge or problem. This one I had a little trouble deconstructing each one because I wanted to put them all together and talk about it all together because they're so close. So the deconstruction would be to identify things within a general topic that are interesting. Hey, we're learning about Lewis and Clark's travels. What I think is interesting is how they kept their wagons in good repair. That's what I want to talk about, or I'm really interested in this buffalo hunt and how exactly they did that, not just hunting in general. Show curiosity about something that you've seen, read, or heard, being anything. And this is how we do regular inquiry. Hey, I was watching CSI last night and I really wonder if this is true. Hopefully that's not kindergarten, but you never know. Asking questions that display an interest instead of, oh, so what other questions do you want to ask? And it's very fact-based, or it's very, and how many pages does this have to be? Instead, well, how long can I make it? Kind of questions. Working with partners, that's a skill in and of itself. Collaborating on choosing or creating a process to follow through. Considering non-traditional methods of problem solving. Maybe just book research is not the best way to do this. Maybe we need an experiment. Maybe we need to start a survey and we need to approach this from a different angle, that sort of thing. Collaborating to create or identify multiple solutions. More people means more ideas. More ideas mean more possibilities. And then we have multiple solutions. And so if this doesn't work for this group, maybe it'll work for this group. Sending an email out is not always the best way to reach parents. What other ways are we going to send that information home? So all of those pieces are involved. Share looks like, at kindergarten level, asking questions on relevant topics or personal interests. Sometimes that we need to teach them in kindergarten to ask about the specific topic at hand. Sometimes it's just, what do you want to know? Let's talk about how to make that a question. Explore with partners or in small groups so that there is a collaboration, so that we are talking to each other, because we're starting to learn that the actual talking to each other is part of the learning process. Again, hands-on activities, begin asking questions, making them actual questions. By 5th grade, doing those hands-on activities as experiments, as research, branching the class curriculum into personal projects, taking this is what we've learned, what can we do with it. I have one school where the fourth graders do an individual learning project. They call it a learning fair, and they take one of the topics that they've learned all year long as they've talked about science and Wyoming history, and they ask them to do some sort of a project and bring it in and share what they've learned with it. So that's part of that, being able to say, well, this is what I want to know about. We talked about energy. I want to know more about how solar panels work. So I'm going to experiment with it. Working together to create new knowledge, that would be even more powerful if we could match up people who have the similar interests. Instead of having 3 solar panel projects, those 3 students work together and see what they come up with. Begin connecting with the real world. This is something that I know about what's going on in the world. This is how I want to learn more about it. I added in breakout games here too, because it's a great way to have kids work together, talk about things, share what they know. Because sharing what you know does not always have to be the end product, stand up and teach the class. Sometimes it's sharing, but I know this, and be able to communicate, oh, when I read this book, and this is what it said in the book I read, now what did you read? And share that way in the process. Eighth grade, we should be collaboratively working, grouping by common interests, creative, innovative ways to explore projects, explore topics, come up with out-of-the-box kind of ways to start looking at things, using hands-on activities, and then utilizing real-world connections. And some of that can be teacher-led, as being able to say, hey guys, I saw this is happening in our community. How can we add to this? And then I stuck breakout games in there too. And I know you can use breakout games in kindergarten as well, but I kind of think that once they've learned to do things in groups, it's a little bit more engaging and fun. 10th grade, community collaboration on projects. So maybe by 10th grade, we can get partners in the community and we can have real world projects that we're working on and adding to those things. And I'm sure you could probably do that at 8th, at 5th, at 4th, at 3rd. I know our student council at one of my schools was just doing fundraiser stuff and actually communicating with the animal shelter about things that they needed and how to go about doing that. So there are ways to do that even at younger grades. Seeking innovative solutions based on a new way of looking at problems. And hands-on activities, breakout games. A lot of those look the same, they're just going to be a little bit more in-depth. Looking at Explore, Grow, our competencies are that learners develop through experience and reflection by iteratively responding to challenges, recognizing capabilities and skills that can be developed, improved, and expanded, and open-mindedly accepting feedback for positive and constructive growth. And this is hard, man, this whole idea of recognizing what you don't know and figuring out how to ask for help and how to take that criticism and how to give that criticism even. So deconstructing, we have to understand multiple ways to solve challenges, identify the most helpful process for problem solving, understand that not all problems are solved on the first try or in the first process, demonstrating persistence in attempts. This is where we're going to start getting our growth mindset, getting our grit to be showing through and being able to say, hey, wait a second, that didn't work, let's try this. Reflecting, and then when we get into 2, it's a lot of reflecting. Reflect on both the finished product and the process of problem solving. What is it that I wish my teacher had taught me that I didn't know? What should I have asked for help on? What should I have asked my teammates before I went off on my own to work on this? Recognize that no matter how good or bad, work can always be improved. So even if you think you did a stellar job, you're getting an A on it, what could I have done better? There's always going to be something, what could I have done better? Or, hey, this was just so bad I can't even think about it anymore. But what was bad about it? What can I do next time to make it better? Recognizing that some problems might need multiple solutions. I can't get the kindergartners to understand this, but the 3rd graders understood it fine. So how do I move it down and get them to get there? Show grit by seeking feedback and learn to give constructive feedback to peers. This is one of the spots in which this particular shared foundation has been so exciting to me because I have a school that is having a huge focus in the staff development on grit, and how do we get students to look for that growth mindset? How do we teach them that it's okay to fail, get up, and try again? And it's changing our school culture because we have a different way of looking at things, and our students are more willing to stand up and try something because they know it's okay if they don't get it right the first time. And I love that my standards, I look at these as my standards as the librarian in the district, are where we can pinpoint and say, see, we're teaching that to a standard. And that matters to my administrator as well. Explore, grow looks like at kindergarten learning the process of try again. It has to be at that young age that we instill that idea of it's okay if you don't get it right the first time. Let go of the being a perfectionist kind of thing. Engage in conversations about the process of learning. If even with kindergarten we sit down and say, so how did that go? What did you like about that activity we just did? What was hard about it? What do you think we could have done differently the next time we do this activity? Because kids may know. And if they don't, if they just sit there and stare at you like you're from another planet, then at least they've heard that question, and in the back of their mind, they might start trying to think about, what if I did that differently? Learning to understand that feedback is a way of making one better. And I think this has to start at kindergarten so that we understand that me telling you that's not quite right, or that doesn't seem to work, what else can we try, is not me saying that you're not good at this. But it's, I know you can do this. How are we going to get there? In 5th grade, we should be demonstrating persistence in seeking out solutions. The number of kids that I have who will sit with a book in front of them and look at me and say, well, I can't find the answer. And then I have to say, well, have you opened the book? Like, we need to get past that. And so start moving into that. Let's do some persistence. Let's show me, before you ask for help, show me the things that you've tried. Begin seeking ideas and feedback from peers. It's not just the teacher who might be able to help with that. Maybe your peers can show you where to look or give you an idea of what button to push or where to go in the program to do this. Learn to reflect on learning experiences. We're starting in 4th and 5th grade. I am with my students talking about, what did you do right? What did you do wrong? What could have been better? What did the teacher need to teach you for you to be more successful? Was there something you should have asked for help with? And then allowing some of that to be a critique on me so that they can say, wait a minute, I didn't know how to take notes. And so you must not have taught me that well enough. And I know that it's positive feedback, it's constructive feedback, because maybe I didn't cover that as well as I should have. I assume that they knew how to do it because this is the 3rd project we've done, and maybe that particular student had been struggling the whole time and I just hadn't caught it yet. In 8th grade, demonstrating persistence in seeking solutions, seeking out that feedback from our peers, reflecting on the learning experiences during the experience. So instead of at the end looking back over everything, having some spots built in for us to have them look at, okay, I've been working on note-taking. How's that going so far? What is it that I can do better? Using that feedback to improve the process or the product. Actually taking that and making it constructive. Because feedback is only constructive if you have a chance to use it. If it's just here's your final grade, that's not constructive. But hey, wait, have you thought about this is constructive. 10th grade, taking charge of your own learning, seeking assistance for skills that need to be improved, actively seeking feedback to strengthen the process and products, and accepting and giving feedback that is positive and constructive. So actively seeking it and then learning to accept it and learning to give it. And really that probably should have been all the way back to kindergarten as well. That idea that you can saying, ooh, that's not very nice, isn't constructive feedback. So give them a plus delta process or a way that they can say something constructive. Have you thought about maybe adding a little bit of green to your tree? Something like that to give something to work with. So explore looks like the traditional, let's go on an exploration. Let's go on a journey. Let's travel. Let's have an adventure. And again, let's go hiking, have an adventure. Since I really like the Lego theme, I thought this photo was fantastic to go with this. It can also be that exploring of what does it look like from different angles. Let's go on looking for information. When I was talking about inquiry with my fourth graders this year, it dawned on me in one class that I need to tell them that it's not looking for answers. It's looking for clues to the answer. It's looking for what kind of things would I need to know, and if I do it right, I'm going to get another question. And then I can investigate that, and by the time that I've looked through enough, I might be able to create my own answer. So I'm looking for clues instead. And then, of course, I had a microscope for looking at small things. I figured I needed a telescope for looking at faraway things. And then I found this image to really go with that explore really is everything. And I don't even know what all is in that picture, but I loved the picture of an image of a person with the world inside of them. And that's what exploring means to me. And the library is such a great place to be able to do it, to be able to take something and just, what can I learn? What is out there? What don't I know? Is there something I've never heard of that I can start reading in the encyclopedia and then find out more and then keep going? And so exploring is a way to fill us with wonder and fill us with amazement at the world that we live in. And it's powerful to be able to be in a library and offer that to our kids, offer that big, outside of the box, outside of what is taught in our classes. This is the world. And we are preparing our students to create their own futures, create the jobs that they're going to have, because they don't exist yet. So they have to be able to identify a problem to solve, figure out how to explore the possibilities, and create a niche that they can fill. And the successful ones are going to be the ones that can do that and create their own company and create their own solution to whatever problems they see and that they are passionate about. And exploring this standard feels to me like the one that's going to open that passion. And that's a very, very powerful very, very powerful piece of this standards. So we have to talk about assessment ideas after that. As much as I love the idea of exploration being open-ended, exit tickets, a chance to say, how's it going, what's going on, tell me about it. Observation, looking at kids as they're doing it. Are they persisting? Are they keeping up? Are they trying something else? Or are they sitting and staring at the wall? Conferencing, having time to sit down and talk to them, because some of our kids can articulate it verbally better than they can on an exit ticket or on a product. Reflection surveys, being able to say, hey, what is it that we are reflecting on? How is it going? What is my learning? What do I need a little bit of help with? And maybe giving those spots throughout the process instead of just at the end. And then checklists, which I think are very helpful for trying to get kids to keep moving at their own pace. Otherwise, they're going to be stuck at a spot where they think they're done and don't know where else to go, and that can really kind of cut off our momentum in the process. For summatives, I think rubrics, especially a rubric item for a final product of, did you seek feedback? Do you have multiple answers? Those sorts of things. A self-assessment covering the process and the product. Maybe that, and I was thinking, maybe an essay about what would I do next time, having that be a component, not necessarily here's your summary, here's your summative assessment, tell me what you would do differently, but at least as a part of that. Because really, when you're exploring, your summative is going to be the product that you create at the end. So being able to include some of those things in that summative to help give us an idea of where our students are. When we look across the frameworks, I chose this time for CREATE, and we're only looking at one because the frameworks for the school librarian and the school library alignments are part of the you need to purchase the package, so to protect AASL's products. We're only going to look at one, but to see how they go together. And so the CREATE domain, the learner is to construct new knowledge by persisting through self-directed pursuits, by tinkering and making. The school librarian stimulates learners to construct new knowledge. So from the learner, the learner is supposed to construct new knowledge. The school librarian wants to stimulate learners to construct new knowledge by maybe providing opportunities for tinkering and making, having lessons that go with that. And then the school library alignment, the school library facilitates construction of new knowledge by ensuring that multiple learning activities can occur in both physical and virtual spaces. I struggle with the virtual space part myself, but I love that idea that the library should have multiple learning activities. We should have multiple ways of doing things. And that the school library facilitates that new construction of new knowledge while the school librarian stimulates the learners and the learners construct their knowledge. So that brings us to our end of, and I know we're running out of time here, but getting to questions about exploring. Are there any?
Nope, I do not see any questions at this time.
Okay.
So well done. I especially like those pictures that demonstrate what the shared foundation looks like. I think that really hits home. You know, you have your maps, I mean, it's everything.
Right.
The microscope, the telescope, just anything, however near or far, explore it.
Exactly. Open your mind to it. I loved that one of the competencies was open-mindedness. And keep your mind open. What can you see?
Yes. Yes. Don't be afraid. Yeah.
Make sure you have I Spy books. High schoolers love those too.
Oh my gosh, adults love those.
Yeah, no kidding, right? We all want to know where Waldo and Carmen Sandiego are. There, now that's dated me a little bit, hasn't it?
Oh, I loved Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego with the floppy disks, and you had to switch out the floppy disks when you went to a different country.
Yeah, so let's speak about exploring. What would happen if we put a floppy disk in front of some of our students? You know, the 3.5-inch ones. The 4.25-quarter-inch ones, whatever those big ones were called.
The ones that were actually floppy. So,
right.
Yeah.
Before it became a hard floppy.
All right, so here is our contact information again. Jennison, thank you so much for doing this. And I did forget to introduce myself at the beginning. I'm Paige Bradenkamp. I work at the Wyoming State Library as the school library consultant. And you are definitely welcome to get in touch with me or Jennison on any questions you have about standards, school libraries, anything.
Yeah, we definitely wouldn't be doing this without Paige.
Oh, well, no, this is a team effort, so thank you. This is great. Next month will be the final installment of the School Library Standards in-depth review with Shared Foundation 6, and I believe that's Engage.
Yes, it is.
And that will be on June 12th. It will be out on the Wyoming State Library Continuing Education Calendar. You can find that on the Wyoming State Library website. And the recording, again, for this one, for all of them, for 1 through 4, for the overview, and for number 6 that's coming out, you can find on the YouTube channel, the Wyoming State Library YouTube channel, as well as on the State Library website under Training Archives. And that should be out next week or so. So without further ado, I guess we'll wrap this one up. Good timing.
Thank you, Paige.
Yeah, thank you. And I will see you next month, Jennison. And you all as well.